We are group 3. I'm Meta. Zoe, Jenny, and Regent all are my group members. Today our topic is realism. Next. Our PowerPoint will divide it into 6 parts. The first part, learning outcomes. The second part, introduction. The third part, educational implications of realism. The fourth part, discussion the application of realism. The fifth part, conclusion. The sixth part, references. Next. Okay, next I will introduce the learning outcome and the introduction and the conclusion. Next. We listed 3 learning outcomes. 1. Understand the meaning and the characteristics of realism. 2. Objective to evaluate the educational implications of realism in nursing curriculum. Education objective, teacher schedule teachers and students' roles. 3. Appreciate the relationship between realism and education and its application in teach activities. Next. The second part, introduction. Next. Realism, in fact, is a kind of pessimism. It cares about reality. It has sociality and analytical criticism. It has clear social purpose and ideological education function. The most important sense you should remember on this page is realism is a kind of pessimism, and it cares about what happens in reality. Okay, next page. Realism is one of the most common terms in literary question and literary research. It is generally used in 2 senses. First, in a broad sense, it refers to the loyalty of literature and art to nature and reality. The authenticity of the work or the similar with object is criterion to judge whether the work is successful or not. Take a simple example. I found a picture and I hope that he would draw my face on the paper. If the final work is very similar to me and even my black hair circles can reflect it, then I will affirm and appraise the artist's skill. If the painting is judged by the standard of realism, it is successful because it has authenticity and has a high degree of similar with the object. In there is very similar with my face. Okay, the second, realism in a neuroscience is a historical concept, which refers to the realism movement originated in France in the 19th century. Okay, next. To be precise, realism challenges the romantic or idealistic art conventions, which resist every unrealistic thing, against fantasy, against camouflage, against imitation. Realism advocates that people should look at the existing problems in the reality with the calm air, think about their own destiny, and seek ways to improve their living conditions. The reality is not as beautiful as you imagine. Don't live in your own fantasy. Everyone knows the story Cinderella and Prince Charming, right? This is a fairy tale, but the reality is that there are not so many Cinderella in the world who can meet the Prince Charming to save themselves. Only your own efforts can save yourselves. Okay, this is the reality. Next, the meaning of realism theory is as follows. First, it is the most fundamental meaning of the realistic terms to reproduce the social reality in a real and objective way. Realism pursues objectivity. For example, no matter how rich a country is, there will still be a gap between the rich and the poor. Realism will speak for the disadvantages. Disadvantaged groups who fall into poverty and are marginalized, so as to attract social attention and improve that. Realism has simple human feelings and humanitarian spirit. The second, typical theory. Typical reproduce the typical characters in the typical environment. Realism calls the literary image of the perfect combination of individual particularity and the universality of the court as the typical image. For example, in Dandy and Robust, Victor's Belacqua is a typical image. Lunch, robust, and the Italian class reflect people's physiological needs, higher hopes, and spiritual pursuits. He is not only a representative of people all over the world in some ways, but also a complete and individual person. The third, historical requirements with social analysis as the core. It requires a true description of the complex social relations and the development process, to reveal the dialectics between man and society, through man's realistic contradiction. For example, A Dream of Red Mansions. It is one of the Chinese four great masterpieces. The author described the complex social relations, and it can reflect this meaning. Okay, next. The characteristics of realism are as follows. One, the authenticity of details. It is necessary to have real detailed description and reflect social life with historical and concrete life pictures. As described after leaving the store in Belacqua. He sieged and his feet were incomplete, and he suffered most constantly. This specific description attracts readers to deeply understand Victor's pessimistic idea that the world is cruel and the life is pain. Second, the typicality of image. Through typical methods, this paper selects, refines, and summarize the real-life materials so as to profoundly reveal some ancient characteristics of life. For example, although the lobster was thought died all afternoon, it was still alive, but in the end, it was slowly killed, was cooked, shattering of Belacqua's naive wish. It revealed that every life is going to die slowly. The third, the objectivity of concert description. Through the objective and the concrete description of real life, the author should naturally reflect others' ideological tendency and feelings of life and truth from the scene and the plot of the work, rather than the author himself or through the mouths of the characters. I think Danny and Robust are the perfect display of the characteristics of realism. Fichte naturally reflects his ideological tendency by describing Belacqua's life and the characters around him. The world is cruel, life is pain, so what's the use of hard work? The only progress we can make is death and slowly. Spiritual pursuits and physical needs never seem to be met at the same time. Okay, next page.
The three part is educational in politicians or realism. Next. Realism and nursing course. Really take nurse as concerned about the actual patient care and is impacted on the patient rather than an ideal patient care based on the theories by have learned. Realism transcend natural science and social science. Realism includes experience, events, and even materialism. In nursing school, you will learn the theories of nursing practice and how to apply them to clinical practice. When interning clinical work, you will find that the ideals sought by the school consistent with the reality of the nursing world. Realism is your beginning to understand the opposite of the idealistic where you learned in nursing school. Realistic nurse know that pain is subjective to the patient. However, when you say that your abdominal pain level is 10, but you are lunging and asking for food with your family and friends, then your pain level may not be 10. The realistic nursing method is very clear, and if you are sick, then you should be born sick on or have singers and symptoms that indicated that you are sick. 2. Realistic nurse education concept. Increased knowledge can improve your patient care. Choosing to increase your knowledge through formal education or continuing education also provides you with growth opportunities and lifelong learning skills in the nursing field. Third, application of submutation-based education strategies in nursing education. Realism is defined as representing scenes or situations in an actual or true manner. Nursing educators are striving to meet the demands needs of the complicated healthcare system. The system is providing patients with extremely high actual. Simulation is used in nursing education more than ever before. In healthcare education, simulation efforts to replicate culture based aspects of the clinical situation so that it can be easy to understand and manage when it occurs in clinical practice. In simulation, it is important to make the simulation experience a rarely as possible. This is mainly done by letting students prefer tasks rather than just pretending to be done. The word pretend should be strictly prohibited in all imitation experiment. Pretending is defined as giving a wrong pretense or wrong representation. If you pretend to be sick, you can only lie in bed. But when a disease is simulated, there will be actual singers and simple the disease. If the situation requires intervals injection and requires individuals struggle injection, the students should start intervention injection and push the drug. Next. Realism and education goals. The education goal is to cultivate the direction and the specifications of people and reflect the process of education. Determine studies suitable educational goals based on the realism. Play the role of educational goals and complete teaching task. To the goal of realism education is to provide students with the necessary knowledge to survive in the natural world, understand real life, and teach the turn. 3. Help individuals understand and use scientific practices to help solve problems that plague the modern world. Next. Realism and teaching struggles. According to realism, the teaching method is to abstract from the personality of teachers and the students and let the factors speak for them. The release approach includes teaching the necessary of facts to deepen their understanding of natural law. This can be done by teaching methods and their applications. The realist teaching method starts from each part and considers them to be real. He regards the whole as the predictor of each department, although these parts are counted to the embodiment of the whole. They retain their individual independence to the center intent. Next.
The teacher, according to realist, is expected to have a knowledge of the context and the needs of the children. The teacher must be capable to present before the children in a clear and intelligible way by employing psychological and scientific methods. The method which the new realist apply to their problems and philosophy is called as the scientific method. It's the duty of the teacher to tell children about the scientific discoveries, researches, and invitations by others in the field of knowledge. A teacher should know whom to teach, why to teach, when to teach, how much to teach. She has a knowledge of children's psychology. She has undergone training. The teacher himself should also be engaged in some research work and experimentation. At the same time, he must inspire the children to undertake their and close observation and experimentation so that they are able to find out the new facts. The teacher must understand the amount of knowledge to be provided to the children and the specific time there. Realists insist upon the training of the teacher before engage themselves in the teacher worker in an effective. Realism in education recognizes the importance of the child. The child is a real unit which has real existence. He has some feelings, some diagnoses, and some powers. All this cannot be overlooked. These powers a child should have to be given due regarding at the time of planning education. Child can reach near reality through learning by reason. Child has to be given as much freedom as possible. The child is to be enabled to proceed on the basis of facts. The child can learn only when he following the laws of learning. According to Lancaster, the chief aim of education is to deliver the child's real tendency to its perfection. Realists have considered the teacher or the child as a focal point of education. Hence, the child's desires, feelings, sentiments, tendencies, and faculties cannot be overlooked. According to realists, the child will have to be enabled to present from ignorance to knowledge and to beget the knowledge of the real. Unlike naturalist, idealist, and realist want to educate a child how to become a man so that he can face the real challenges of life.
The fourth part is discuss the application of realism in teaching activities. Next. Realism, education realism. Realism is a belief developed by Aristotle that there is an absolute reality and educational realism attempts to teach students how to find that reality through logical process, study of the natural world, as well as the skill of inquiry and the scientific method are all important parts of realist classroom. Next. Next. What is a realism in curriculum? Last. The realist curriculum emphasize the subject matter. Next. The realist curriculum emphasize the subject matter of the physical world, particularly science and mathematics. The teacher organize and present content systematically within a discipline demands tracing use of criteria in making these decisions. This is to say, what the teacher should conform to the reality. Next. Education realism. First, education realism is belief that we should learn logical, critical thinking, and scientific methods to teach students to recognize and understand reality. Realists believe that the college job is to teach students to understand the world around them relative to the basis of adult actions in the foundation to realize to adult realism refers to from the true nature of the world. The guide action according to the reality so as to arrive the binaries of action. Therefore, realism is necessary condition for the idealistic and primates. Second, realism probably has the greatest impact on educational philosophy because it is a basis of scientific reason. Realistic educators encourage students to draw their own observation and conclusions from the world around them rather than limiting themselves to the analysis of their own thoughts. Next. What is critical realism education? Critical realism accepts educational structures and social structures that impact on education, such as assessment as real, which allows them not only to be described and evaluated as course, mechanisms of action, but also the practice that can be altered, allowing critically to be reconceptualized. For example, just the philosophers now think that to the speed is light is a faster speed. It may be found that the faster speed will be found later. With the development of science and technology, then the definition will be redefined. Next.
Okay, the conclusion. Next page. After all the sharing of our explain of the realism, I will summarize some things. A person can have an idealism and grand goals, but he must have realistic ways of doing things. Set small goals that can be achieved in different stages of life and step by step towards success. That meaning only you take action and then you will get the successful. If you only live in your own uh, uh, fantasy, you will stand in in your own self and can't get the grade. Okay, thank you. Next, this is our reference. Next, reference about our document. Okay, thank you.